Counsel?
Yes. Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Kite, you told the Santa Barbara sheriffs that you have no personal knowledge of anything Michael Jackson has done, correct?
That's correct, yes.
You told them you had no personal knowledge that any molestation ever took place with Michael Jackson, correct?
That's correct, yes.
You also told them you had no personal knowledge about Janet Arvizo ever being kidnapped, correct?
Other than what I heard from Mark Schaffel and my own feelings.
You told the police that you may be wrong, you may have overreacted, and maybe there was no kidnapping, right?
That was always a possibility, but that's not what I believed.
Well, you told the police that, in your mind, maybe you're wrong. Maybe you overreacted. Maybe there was no kidnapping at all, right?
That's what I said, yes.
Okay, for obvious reasons, you weren't there.
That's correct.
Okay, you told them you can't imagine what it's like to be in a cage and watched all the time, right?
That's correct, yes.
You told the sheriffs that you were on the phone with LeGrand and Schaffel when NBC was negotiating for footage regarding the rebuttal tape, right?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
And that's the footage that eventually went to Fox, correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
That's the footage that was produced in response to the Bashir documentary, correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
And you said that LeGrand issued a statement to the press that Garrigus ordered to make NBC look bad, right?
No, that's not what I said. That's not what I said. If you'd like me to explain that incident to you, I'd be glad to.
Is that wrong, what I just said? I'm just looking at the report. Is that wrong?
You're taking it out of context. Yes, it's wrong.
Would it refresh your recollection if I just show you the paragraph?
You can show me the paragraph. I know what it's referring to, and it's a summary of what I said, and it's not correct.
Okay, I didn't summarize it.
That's okay. I'm just letting you know.
Okay. Did you complain that Mr. Garrigus wanted to make NBC look bad?
No. I didn't say anything about Mr. Garrigus trying to make NBC look bad, no.
Do you know where the sheriffs got that remark?
I said it about Mr. Schaffel, not about Mr. Garrigus.
Okay.
And Mr. Garrigus gave the okay to release the information.
Okay. Did you tell the sheriffs that Mr. Garrigus gave the okay to release information that was damaging to NBC?
Yes, I did.
And correct me if I'm wrong. I think what you're saying is that Schaffel prepared that information, right?
What I'm saying is that Schaffel spoke with Mr. Garrigus and Mr. LeGrand and pushed for the information to be released.
Okay.
Yes.
And did you object to releasing that information?
I didn't know about it when it happened. But when I found out, I objected vigorously, yes.
Was that because you didn't want to make NBC look bad?
It was because I felt it was bad precedent, period.
Okay. Was it your understanding that Schaffel and Mr. Garrigus were trying to make NBC look bad?
It was my understanding that Mr. Schaffel in particular was trying to make NBC look bad.
But you thought Mr. Garrigus had okayed it?
David LeGrand told me that the okay came from Mr. Garrigus.
Okay. And you said you wanted to publicly exonerate NBC and CBS, true?
I remember saying NBC, but I don't remember saying CBS.
Okay. You wanted to somehow make up for the fact that NBC ended up looking bad?
No, I didn't want to make up for it. I felt terrible for the fallout that NBC received based on the memo that Mr. Schaffel arranged to have released. It wasn't right and it wasn't fair.
Okay. And did Schaffel tell you why he wanted to do this?
I knew why he wanted to do it. He didn't have to tell me.
What did he tell you about it?
Well, he was upset because NBC was producing another special about Mr. Jackson and they were referring to Mr. Schaffel's past.
Okay. And Mr. Schaffel also was upset that he wasn't getting any profit from that show, correct?
I don't know if he would have gotten profits from the NBC show or not. I don't know.
Okay, alright. Did you believe Mr. Backerman was involved in that effort?
In what effort?
The effort by Schaffel and Garrigus.
To NBC?
Yes.
To release that memo?
Yes.
No, I don't believe so.
Okay. Now, at some point you told the sheriffs that Garrigus brought in another PR firm. Is that right?
That's correct.
Who was that?
Eric Desenhall.
From Washington, D.C.?
Yes, I did.
Did you ever speak to him?
Yes, I did.
When did you last speak to him?
Probably in April of that same year, 2003.
And did you speak to him about the work he was going to do?
I spoke to him. David had asked me to speak to him about several different things.
Okay. And you complained that Mr. Desenhall told you that Mr. Jackson is not socially relevant.
Yes, he did say that.
And you were upset that a public relations spokesperson would ever say that about a client, right?
Yes, I was.
You were particularly upset that he would say that about his new client, Michael Jackson, right?
I was upset because I didn't believe, no matter what, that there would ever come a time that Mr. Jackson wasn't socially relevant.
And you don't know if Mr. Desenhall ever met or spoke to Mr. Jackson, do you?
No, sir, I don't.
Your understanding is simply that Mr. Garrigus hired him?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
You complained that Mr. Desenhall shouldn't make a statement like that about Mr. Jackson, true?
I don't know that I complained, but I would never make a statement about that about a client of mine, no matter what.
You accused him of doing nothing and saying nothing, right?
I didn't accuse him. I believed that he would be a very good fit for the team because he had the same hunker-down philosophy, the same philosophy of, don't say anything. Don't put anything out. It doesn't matter what bad press is out there, we can't refute it. We're already behind the 8 ball.
Did you complain that you thought Mr. Desenhall was throwing his client to the wolves?
I don't remember saying that about Mr. Desenhall.
Did you use words to that effect?
I believe I said, the team, or I felt that basically that's what the team was doing to Mr. Jackson by not being proactive and responding for him in the press.
Okay. You complained that Mr. Konitzer wanted to build a website called MJJ Invincible, right?
I didn't complain. I stated that when I was hired, Mr. Konitzer asked to put up a website, and the URL that he wanted to use was MJJ Invincible. And I told him I thought that was highly inappropriate, given the backlash that was out there with the Bashir documentary and everything else going on. I didn't believe that Mr. Jackson should put himself in that position to be subject to more ridicule from the press by having a website domain of that name.
But you don't know if Mr. Jackson even knew about this idea, right?
No, sir, I don't.
You said Konitzer was out of his mind, right?
Yes, I did. I did.
You said, that's the last thing they should do, correct?
That's absolutely what I said.
Okay. You thought that Mr. Schaffel was saying things to the press to get himself back in Michael Jackson's good graces, correct?
Yes, sir, I did.
Because you knew that Mr. Schaffel was not in Michael Jackson's good graces, right?
Objection. Requires speculation as to what she knew about Mr. Jackson's intent or knowledge.
Sustained.
Did someone tell you that Mark Schaffel was not in Michael Jackson's good graces?
No one told me that specifically.
Well, but you did tell the sheriffs you thought Schaffel was trying to get back into his good graces, true?
Objection. Argumentative.
Sustained.
You told the Santa Barbara sheriffs that Michael Jackson has a lot of talent but never matured past the age of 12, right?
I didn't say it that way, no, sir.
You said something to that effect, didn't you?
No, what I said to him, to the sheriffs, when they spoke to me, was that I felt that Mr. Jackson was very talented, extremely talented, but the way that he was portrayed was that he hadn't matured past the age of 12.
Okay, and clearly, you didn't think this team was helping him deal with any of this, did you?
No, sir, I did not.
You thought they were actually hurting him, didn't you?
Yes, sir, I did.
Now, clearly you have never personally observed Mr. Jackson do anything wrong.
Counsel, you've asked that question 10 times today. I want you to look at the jury and realize that they're tired of listening to this.
Okay.
You need to grasp the evidence and present it, not keep repeating it.
Okay, Yes, Your Honor. Just a few more questions. Did you send the team a series of letters that appeared to have favorable responses to the Bashir documentary by email?
I don't know what you're referring to.
Well, did you ever send to? Just 1 second. May I just take a second, Your Honor?
Yes.
When you first were retained, you were sending various emails to the team, correct?
Sending and receiving, yes.
And you were trying to educate the team about responses to the Bashir documentary, correct?
I don't remember.
Okay. Do you remember what the subject of those emails was?
I don't remember, sir. I sent a lot of emails during that time.
Did you ever send an email that basically showed letters where people were saying they thought Mr. Jackson was being exploited in Bashir?
I don't remember.
Okay. Do you remember ever discussing that?
We may have discussed it as a way to attack Mr. Bashir. But I don't remember. I mean, part of the plan was to try to get Mr. Jackson's image rehabilitated. So obviously anything that could show Mr. Bashir had ill intent towards Mr. Jackson would be very helpful to us.
Did you investigate Mr. Bashir's background yourself?
No, sir, I didn't have the time.
Did you plan to do that?
Yes, sir, I did.
Did you take any measures to do that at all?
No, not at the time, no.
Did you hire anybody to do that?
No, sir, I didn't.
Do you know Mr. Bashir?
No, sir, I do not.
Okay. No further questions.
Thank you.
Ms. Kite, you mentioned when you were referring to Mr. Desenhall you had that hunker-down approach?
Yes, I did.
What did you mean by that?
Don't say anything to the press. Don't talk. If negative publicity comes out, you just brush it off and move on.
Is that an uncommon philosophy in PR?
I think it's more uncommon, yes.
Is it a non-existent philosophy? I mean, is it very rare, I should say?
I would think that it would be more rare than common.
Okay. Do some PR firms implement that philosophy?
Yes, they do.
Was it evident to you that that was the philosophy of the team?
Yes, it is. Yes, it was.
Including Belliard?
No, not Belliard.
Okay. Everybody with the exception of Belliard?
Yes, that's correct.
And did you have an impression as to whether or not the team thought that was the best way to go about these things, whether or not?
Whether to hunker down or not?
Yes.
My impression was that they didn't want to do anything. They wanted to hunker down, because anything I asked to be able to do on behalf of Mr. Jackson I was told not to.
Did you ever develop an impression as to why they wanted to hunker down?
My impression was that there was obviously something more important than Mr. Jackson's public relations going on.
Okay. You said that you've never met Mr. Jackson.
That's correct.
And do you know if anybody from Belliard, that you dealt with, ever met Mr. Jackson?
Not to my knowledge.
And Mr. Backerman, you said, never met Mr. Jackson?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. There was a statement made to you by Mr. Schaffel concerning Janet selling her story to the tabloids.
Yes.
Do you recall talking about that?
Uh-huh.
Did you ever have any information or knowledge that Janet wanted to sell a story to the tabloids?
No, sir, I did not.
Did you ever have any information that Janet even had a story to tell the tabloids?
No, sir, I did not.
Did you question anybody about that? What's this story about? Did you ever?
I thought it. When Mr. Schaffel said that he was afraid she was going to sell her story to the tabloids, my first thought was, what story? But I never really questioned anybody about it.
You said that one of the witnesses, I believe it was, well, I can't recall. I believe you stated that someone told you Schaffel hadn't seen Jackson for a couple of months.
Yes. Mr. Konitzer told me that in a telephone call.
Do you know if that's true?
I have no direct knowledge of that.
What was the context of that conversation?
I was, again, extremely concerned, because the media was raising questions about Mr. Schaffel's background, and I wanted to be able to answer them. And Mr. Konitzer, I kept telling him, this is not a good thing to have Mr. Schaffel continuously linked with Mr. Jackson in the press. We need to stop here this. And he told me at that point that Mr. Schaffel hadn't seen Mr. Jackson for a couple of months.
Okay, but you have no idea whether that's true?
No, sir, I don't.
Do you know anything about Mr. Schaffel's relationship with Mr. Jackson?
Not personally, no.
As to how many times he talks to him or sees him or any of that?
No, I don't.
What about Mr. Garrigas's relationship with Mr. Jackson? Do you have any knowledge as to how often they talk or dealt with each other during this point?
No, sir.
Mr. Konitzer, same question.
No, sir, I don't. I know that Ronald portrayed to me that he stayed at the ranch, that he talked directly to Michael, but I couldn't tell you if that's true or not.
No personal knowledge. What about Mr. LeGrand? Did he tell you whether or not he talked with Mr. Jackson?
Yes, he did.
What did he say about that?
Told me that he had talked to Mr. Jackson, that he met him in Miami when he went to do the power of attorney, that he went to Neverland to be there on a day that they were supposed to tape a special with CBS that got cancelled. And I don't remember the times after that, but I know there were other times after that.
Did Mr. LeGrand have Mr. Jackson's phone number, do you know?
I'm sure he did. I never asked him.
Did Mr. LeGrand? You stated that Mr. LeGrand expressed some concerns to you about these people that were around Mr. Jackson. Did Mr. LeGrand ever express those concerns to Mr. Jackson, according to Mr. LeGrand?
Yes, he did.
So he told you he did talk to Mr. Jackson about it?
Yes.
And informed him of the problems?
Yes, that's correct.
When did this happen?
In March. Mid-March.
You said that Mr. Konitzer had a power of attorney at some point?
Yes, that's correct.
And do you know anything about the power of attorney?
The only thing that I know is David told me that it could be overridden at any time by the client and that it required 2 signatures.
Okay. So, 2 signatures. What does that mean?
I don't know. That's just what he said.
So the power of attorney required 2 signatures. Could you tell whether or not he was talking about actions taken under the power of attorney or the power of attorney itself?
I couldn't tell you.
Okay. The Fox special. First of all, who is Fire Mountain? You testified briefly about Fire Mountain.
Fire Mountain is a corporation that David set up in Las Vegas.
And who are the parties, the principals in that corporation?
Objection. Foundation.
Sustained.
Okay. There was this NBC memo that Mr. Schaffel was upset about. Do you know what that was all about?
What the memo was about?
Yes.
Yes, the memo was.
Objection. Hearsay. Foundation.
Sustained.
You said that the Fox rebuttal program produced, or there was a contract for that program to produce $3 million, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you also said you believed some of that money went to Mr. Jackson?
Yes, I believe that.
What did you base that on?
I guess based on what David said and, I never saw money actually transferred into Mr. Jackson's hands, so.
Did this transaction take place while you were working as a PR person?
Yes, it did.
Were you upset about it?
Yes, I was.
Why?
Because I said that I didn't believe that Mr. Jackson should have to sell the proof of his innocence.
Was that a PR move on your behalf?
Yes, absolutely.
Did you express your concern to anybody?
Yes, I did.
To whom?
To Mr. LeGrand, to Mr. Schaffel, to Mr. Konitzer, to Bell Yard.
Do you know why they didn't take your advice?
Yes, I did.
Objection. Calls for speculation.
Sustained.
Did they tell you why they wanted money for this?
Yes, they did.
What did they say?
Because there was no money.
What do you mean?
Objection. The court's ruling.
Sustained.
Was there any information? You mentioned a number of fires burning, right? What did you mean by that?
Attacks on Mr. Jackson in the press.
Okay. Were there any attacks on Mr. Jackson in the press concerning finances?
Yes.
His finances?
Objection. The court's ruling.
I believe this door has been opened.
I don't think it has, Your Honor.
The question, as presented, all allow, and the answer that was given. Were there any attacks on Mr. Jackson in the press concerning finances? Answer. Yes. That's as far as you can go at this time on that subject.
All right. Who did Mr. LeGrand? He was an attorney. Who was he an attorney for?
Mr. Jackson.
Anybody else, as far as you know? I mean, in this relationship with Mr. Jackson, was he an attorney for a corporation of Mr. Jackson's, or any other entity involving Mr. Jackson?
I don't know. I don't know.
And as an attorney, who did he report to, as Mr. Jackson's attorney?
Objection. Foundation.
If you know, if you've been told.
Just a moment. I'm not quite sure what the question was. I'll sustain the objection.
You mentioned that the power of attorney at some point was revoked?
Yes.
You were, I believe, referring to the power of attorney for Mr. Conitzer?
Yes.
Do you know when that was?
In mid-March of 2003. I believe it was sometime around the 12th of March.
Do you know if that terminated Mr. Conitzer as an employee or from working for Mr. Jackson?
Objection. Foundation.
Your Honor, she was asked a portion of statements.
That's true.
This is the full statement.
You're correct. I understand that. Just let me.
Thank you.
All right. The foundation objection is sustained. But do you want the question read back so you know what I'm ruling on?
Sure. Thank you. Record read. All right. I'll rephrase the question. Did you learn from anybody that Mr. Conitzer was continuing to work for Mr. Jackson after the power of attorney was revoked?
Objection. Foundation.
It's establishing the foundation. It's a yes or no question.
Well, it calls for hearsay, too. It's a little more complicated than that.
Well, I can limit it some more.
Okay.
When you learned that, well, let me back up. When did you learn that the power of attorney was revoked?
Around the 12th of March.
From?
David LeGrand.
Okay. And do you know whether or not that power of attorney, when it was revoked, terminated Mr. Conitzer's employment by Mr. Jackson?
Objection.
Based upon these conversations with Mr. LeGrand?
Foundation and hearsay.
All right. I'm going to let you answer that question yes or no. The question is just whether or not you know, not what the result was.
Yes, I know.
Then the rest of the foundation would be how does she know that? Without telling us the answer.
Okay. How do you know the answer to that question?
Mr. LeGrand told me.
And what did Mr. LeGrand tell you?
He told me that the power of attorney had been terminated, that Ronald didn't have any more control over Michael's finances, but that he was still going to continue to do business with him.
When you went and spoke with Jermaine Jackson, can you tell me how that meeting came together?
I had been speaking with Rita Cosby from Fox. She suggested that I might want to call Jermaine Jackson because he was very concerned about his brother. She gave Mr. Jackson my telephone number. He called me. We spoke. He asked if I'd be willing to come and meet with him. And I told him yes, I would. And I went.
And you expressed concern about some of the team members to Mr. Jermaine Jackson?
Yes, I did.
Did you express any other concerns about Mr. Jackson to Jermaine at that time?
Yes, I did.
What did you tell him?
I expressed concern about his.
Objection. Relevance. 352. Foundation.
The full conversation.
Overruled.
I expressed concern about Mr. Jackson's financial situation.
In what respect?
Objection. Your Honor. The court's ruling.
Sustained.
Did Mr. Jermaine Jackson indicate whether or not he was close to his brother during this conversation?
I don't think he ever said he was close to his brother, but he didn't say he was distant either. He indicated great concern about his brother.
Did he indicate whether or not he had communications with his brother?
Yes, he did.
You also mentioned that Mr. Conitzer and Mr. Wisner had a history of bad business decisions.
Yes.
What did you base that on?
Information from David and information that I'd read in the press.
Okay. And as far as these bad business deals that you had read about in the press, can you give me an approximate time frame as to when these things were published?
No. I'm sorry, I can't. Some of them were before my employment with Mr. Jackson.
Okay.
And some of them after.
It was published in the press, these bad business dealings?
Yes.
Did you, in your dealings with Mr. Schaffel, ever receive any information from him, direct information from him, that he intended to hurt Michael Jackson?
Never.
What about with Mr. Konitzer?
No.
Mr. Backerman?
No.
Mr. Garrigus?
No.
Or Mr. LeGrand?
No.
Did you ever have any information that they intended him any malice, this group of people? Well, that's compound.
Objection.
I'll strike that. Your assessment that they were hurting Michael Jackson, is that based on your professional experience in the public relations field as far as what was going on, or based on something else?
It was based on what I saw in the public relations side, the lack of action.
You felt that the hunker-down approach was all wrong here?
Yes, I did.
Your Honor, there's two areas that I feel are relevant at this point regarding Mr. Schaffel and Mr. Malnick concerning the cross-examination. However, I don't want to go into these areas without the court's permission.
All right, counsel want to approach? To the jury. That means you can talk. Not only that, you have to talk. Discussion held off the record at sidebar. All right, thank you for talking. Counsel, proceed.
Thank you. Ms. Kite, with respect to the public relations problems associated with Mr. Jackson that you've identified, the fire specifically, and I'm talking only about issues that had made their way into the media, was there any negative PR associated with Mr. Jackson specifically regarding Mark Schaffel?
Yes, there was.
What was it?
Objection.
Overruled.
You may answer the question.
Your Honor, the basis is hearsay. 352.
The hearsay objections overruled. The 352, again, if you're talking about undue use of time, it's overruled. This is more evidence, though, it's more evidence that isn't being offered for the truth of the matter asserted. The witness has testified that she was trying to help put out fires, for lack of a better word, I'll use that word, concerning Mr. Jackson, and then there was some cross-examination. And I've now agreed to let the attorney cover two more areas that she might, or she'll testify. We'll see what she testifies to about those things.
We object on foundation also, Your Honor.
Huh?
We object on foundation also.
All right, go ahead.
So I think you previously testified you researched the Internet. You researched the news services, television, etc., correct?
Yes.
Based on that, what specific problem did you identify involving Mr. Jackson's association with Mark Schaffel?
Vague as to time, Your Honor.
I'll be specific. As to during this month of February in 2003.
David told me, and I discovered, that Mr. Schaffel, am I allowed to say?
Yes.
Let's focus specifically on what came out in the media during that month.
What came out in the media during that month was that Mr. Schaffel was a gay pornography producer.
All right, and let's move on to and did you perceive that as a negative public relations association?
With respect to Mr. Jackson, yes, absolutely.
Let's move on to Mr. Malnick. Was there any negative, same question. Based upon all your review of the different news services, was there ever any negative public relations issues presented in the media by virtue of Mr. Jackson's association with Al Malnick?
Yes, there was.
And what was that?
There were.
Speaking about the month of February 2003 again.
There was articles about Mr. Jackson's association with Mr. Malnick as he was reputed to be a known mobster.
All right, thank you. I have no further questions.
Yes, sir.
Any cross?
Ms. Kite, you have no knowledge whatsoever that Mr. Jackson has ever been involved in anything related to gay pornography production?
No, sir, I don't.
And you have no information of Mr. Jackson himself ever being involved in mobster-type activities?
No, sir, I don't.
In fact, you were repeatedly complaining, "You've got to get these people away from Mr. Jackson."
Absolutely, I was.
And you complained they were exploiting him, correct?
Objection. Vaj as to who, they, are. Argumentative as to the word, exploiting.
Overruled. You may answer.
Can you read it back? I'm sorry.
Yes. Record read. I think the answer came in before the objection, but I overruled the objection.
And you went to Mr. Jackson's mother's home, and you met with Jermaine and his mother to tell them that these people were taking advantage of Mr. Jackson, and Mr. Jackson appears to be nowhere to be seen, right?
I went to tell them that I was concerned about the association between these people and Mr. Jackson. Yes, I did.
And you never saw these people with Mr. Jackson, did you?
No, sir, I did not.
Thank you. No further questions.
Nothing further.
Thank you. You may step down. Is this witness excused?
Yes, Your Honor.
You're excused. Call your next witness.
Do you want to keep going, Your Honor?
What time?
Your Honor, can we make it subject to recall?
Excuse me?
We would like to make the witness subject to recall.
All right. You're not permanently excused. You may leave, but you may be recalled. Is that all right?
Okay.
Judge, could we approach for just 5-10 seconds?
All right.
I promise it won't be longer than that. Off-the-record discussion held at sidebar. Call Al Lafferty, Your Honor.
Come forward. When you get to the witness stand, remain standing. Raise your right hand. Face the clerk.
Please raise your right hand. I do. Please be seated. State and spell your name for the record. Albert Lafferty. ALBERT, LAFFERTY. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Mr. Lafferty.
Good afternoon.
How are you employed?
I'm employed by the Santa Barbara County Sheriff's Office.
How long have you been a deputy sheriff?
18 years.
And directing your attention back to November of 2003, okay?
Yes.
What were your duties and assignments at that time?
At that time I was assigned to the Forensics Investigation Unit, the Criminal Investigation Division.
Could you just take a moment and explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what that job with the Forensics Unit involved?
It was our job to respond to crime scenes, document those scenes, search for evidence, collect and preserve the evidence, and process any evidence which was within our capabilities.
With regard to November 18 of 2003, did you participate on the execution of a search warrant on Mr. Jackson's ranch at Neverland Valley Ranch?
Yes, I did.
And what particular duty assignments were you assigned on that day?
I was assigned to shoot video and photographs of the main residence.
Now, was there some significance attached to the manner in which you shot your footage in relationship to the chronology of the events that day?
Yes.
Would you explain that to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury?
I was initially tasked with photographing the interior of the main residence before any search had been conducted.
And the purpose for that?
To document the scene as it was before anything had been disturbed by any of the searching members.
Now, did you also participate in the production, or did you also videotape the premises that day?
That was my purpose, yes, that was to videotape.
So you did video and not still photography?
I did several still photos, but my primary assignment was for video.
And when you did video, were you assigned to a particular location at the ranch premises?
Yes, I was.
Would you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury where you were assigned?
It was the main residence located on the ranch.
Now, were you also assigned responsibility subsequent to that time to take some aerial photographs?
Yes, I was.
And what specifically was your assignment?
To document the ranch property, overall views and specific views of the buildings located on the ranch.
And do you recall when you did that?
That was on March 2 of 2004.
And in that connection, were you also assigned to do some research on just some basic information on the location of the ranch?
Yes.
And the purpose of that?
To be able to identify in the photographs which buildings they were.
Now, were you also, can you tell us whether or not you were involved in the preparation of an exhibit which was used for purposes of court demonstration, actual map location of the premises?
Yes.
And the ranch itself?
Yes, I was.
In relation to other places in Santa Barbara County?
Yes.
Could you describe to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what you did in that connection?
In that connection, what I did was use the Microsoft Streets and Map program, which our unit had at the time, to display a map showing the surrounding area of Santa Ynez Valley and the location of the ranch.
Your Honor, at this time I've had Exhibits 4 through 12 marked for identification purposes. I'm going to show them to counsel for their examination. I believe they have a copy of them already, but, Your Honor, I intend to lay the foundation and ask for their admission. And I want to make sure the procedure's okay with the court ahead of time and then display what I have here on the board.
That's
as we go through them.
That's how I would like to do that.
Your Honor, I have no objection if it will save time. He can put them on the board and show the witness at the same time, if that's all right with the court.
Yes, it is. If there's no objection, that would save time.
Can we move these admitted into evidence at this time, then, Your Honor?
In this case, that's fine, Your Honor. We'll do it that way.
In this case, they're admitted.
In this case, I'll accept it. All right. Deputy Lafferty, let me just hand you those. And let's start with the first exhibit. Could you indicate what People's Exhibit number 4 is?
See what he was suggesting. He agreed they come into evidence, so you could just put them right on the.
We have it set up with the computer, Your Honor.
You do.
If you could activate the PC button.
The PC button? Okay.
It takes a few minutes for the projector to warm up.
It's on, isn't it?
It's coming. Maybe we could dim the lights.
Do you want all of them dimmed?
All right. Deputy Lafferty, could you explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what People's Exhibit number 4 is?
This is the map I made using the Microsoft Streets and Maps showing the Santa Ynez Valley area, community, and the ranch location.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
Yes.
Thank you. All right. I've handed you a little laser pen to help with some of the directions here. Could you locate, for instance, the town of Solvang on there for us?
The city of Solvang is located right here in the lower center portion of the map.
All right. And Los Olivos?
Los Olivos is directly north of that. Right in this area.
Right under the word, California.
That's correct.
Now, I notice that towards the top of the exhibit, People's number 4, and in the middle toward the top is a little red arrow. Is that correct?
Yes.
Could you indicate to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what that red arrow, and could you find it with the laser? There you go.
This right here?
Yes. What is that?
That's a small pushpin used to identify the entrance location of the ranch.
All right. Let's move to the next exhibit, People's 5, if we could. With regard to People's 5, it's in evidence. Could you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what that is?
This is a closer-in view of the area, with the town of Los Olivos being located in the center lower portion of the picture. The yellow line highlights Figueroa Mountain Road as it proceeds north from the town of Los Olivos and ends again at a red pushpin indicating the ranch entrance.
All right. Now, let's go to the next exhibit, People's number 5, or number 6. Could you explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what People's number 6 is?
This is an overall aerial photograph showing the ranch property.
Now, with regard to the information that's been placed on this exhibit, the writing that's on there in yellow, did you do that?
Yes, I did.
And from what sources of information did you put those letters and designations on there?
That was information provided by Sergeant Robel and yourself.
You've been to the ranch yourself, though, have you not?
Yes, I have.
So you recognize the areas depicted up there, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Now, with regard to this particular exhibit, People's number 6, there's an arrow that points back towards Los Olivos?
Yes.
And the road just to the bottom on the diagram, that's marked Figueroa Mountain Road?
That's correct.
Do you know approximately what the distance is from the gate where it says, ranch entrance, to, back to, say, where 154, Highway 154 is?
It's just over 5 miles.
Could we go to People's number 7? Now, People's number 7 is another aerial photograph that you took?
Yes, it is.
And with regard to the designation of the areas of buildings located on this exhibit, did you put those on there?
Yes, I did.
Is that based on your personal information and observations?
Yes, it is.
While you were at the ranch?
That's correct.
All right, let's go to the next number, if we could, which I believe is 8.
That's correct.
All right, and people's number 8 is another aerial you took, correct?
That's correct.
And with regard to the information placed on there, did you place that information on there?
Yes, I did.
And is that information you gathered while you were personally at the ranch on the occasion that you were there?
Yes.
Now, I notice on this particular photograph, this particular exhibit, that there's a road that runs in the upper top of the photograph, about in the middle. Do you see that?
This road here?
Yes, sir. Do you know where that road goes to?
That was the road leading from the main gate entrance on Figueroa Mountain Road that we came in on.
So that's the road that takes you from the main gate to the house?
Yes.
And to the areas depicted on this photograph?
Yes.
All right. Why don't we go to the next exhibit, then? This is number 9?
That's correct.
And with regard to people's number 9, did you place the designations on these particular areas?
Yes, I did.
And this is another aerial that you took?
Yes.
Have you ever been in the theater itself?
No, I have not.
All right, let's go to the next exhibit, which would be people's number 10. And 10 is just a wider view of 9 but has more information, is that correct?
Yes, slightly different angle.
And it just shows the theater and the amusement park?
Yes.
All right, let's go to people's number 11. People's number 11 is another aerial that you took, is that correct?
It is correct.
And the designation that's on there is the zoo?
Correct.
That's the zoo area, as you know it to be?
Yes.
Or at the time you took these photographs?
Yes.
All right, I believe there's one last photograph there, Deputy. What is that?
This is an aerial view of the train station area.
And that's okay. And that's another. In this particular photograph, there is a road that runs directly into the train station where the clock is and goes to the bottom of the photograph.
Yes.
Do you know where that road leads to?
That's the road that leads past the main residence.
Okay, thank you. Your Honor, I do have more questions for this witness, but it will take considerably more than the 2 minutes we have left.
All right, we'll recess for the afternoon. Court's in recess.